Not so magical once you live there.
We went on a cruise.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the West Milton Council meeting for April 2022. I'd please ask everybody to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Lord, our gracious Heavenly Father, we bow before your high and holy presence here this evening, thankful in our hearts for the blessings you've bestowed upon us here today, thankful for the beautiful sunshine that you brought to us, and thankful, Father, for your watchful hand and care that you provided for us today, provision that you have given, and Father, all the other small things that we have failed to count. We thank you for today, and just pray that you would continue to keep your hand of protection, guidance, leadership, and provision upon this community. We're thankful to be a part of it. We're thankful, Father, for each one that gives of their time to make it a better place to live. And Father, we just thank you for the spirit of unity to continue as we strive to that end. We pray that you continue to bless, watch over, and be with us as we strive to do that here tonight. That you give each one wisdom, patience, guidance, and leadership. Pray that you would bless. We thank you, Father, for your Son, Jesus Christ. We're thankful for his resurrection, and Father, just thankful for the hope that it brings to us. Pray that you would again be with us this evening. Watch over us in all things. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Second.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Unrelated.
Mayor Miller,
Here.
Mr. Tracy,
Here.
Ms. Metz,
Here.
Mr. Horn,
Here.
Mr. Hertz,
Here.
Ms. Kopp,
Here.
Mr. Doran.
Here.
I believe there's two members to excuse, Councilwoman Kopp from the February workshop and myself from the March workshop.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we excuse Ms. Kopp from the February workshop and Mr. Miller from the March workshop.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Doran,
Yes.
Ms. Kopp,
Yes.
Mr. Hurst,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Ms. Metz,
Yes.
Mr. Tracy,
Yes.
Mayor Miller.
Yes. Council should have received minutes for the March 8th and March 22nd meetings. Are there any motions for the minutes?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the March 8th and the March 22nd meeting minutes.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Doran,
Yes.
Ms. Kopp,
Yes.
Mr. Hertz,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Ms. Metz,
Yes.
Mr. Tracy,
Yes.
Mayor Miller.
Yes. At this time, I'd like to introduce our representative from Affordable Gas and Electric to talk about the recent bankruptcy. This is Mr. Ross Callier, VP of Operations.
Thank you for having us, or having me. As the mayor indicated, I'm from Affordable Gas and Electric, and we are your village's aggregation consultant. We manage both the electric and natural gas programs. Everything I'm going to talk about tonight is specific to the natural gas side of things, just to be very clear. On March 25th, we were made aware of the bankruptcy of Volunteer Energy, who is the village's, or was the village's, natural gas supplier, contracted from May of 2021 until April of 2023 in the current contract. So obviously that will be cut short as a result of this. So the courts obviously are involved in the bankruptcy proceedings, and it's a federal court that is subject to PUCO rules and regs governing these aggregation programs. And first and foremost, what the PUCO mandates is that if any supplier of a governmental aggregation program becomes insolvent or has any kind of a bankruptcy event, that all of the customers, i.e. the residents, would be returned to the utility's default supply. In this, I will frequently say Vectren, I guess it is now called CenterPoint. And so residents should have been defaulting over the last, 15 some days. Whenever their March meter reads are, they will be returned to utility default service. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that in the immediate term. So to step back a little bit and just describe some of the history of this program for some context, as I indicated, it was from May of 2021 to April of 2023, the current contract. Roughly 750 households on the program. That would actually be a mix of households and businesses, which I believe you guys have, I'm guessing, about 1,900 total households if I'm doing population divided by 2.5. So about 40% of the households who would, are in the community would be on the program. That is not an uncommon statistic. So the aggregation program only serves those folks who have not already made an electric or gas supply choice on their own. And in the state of Ohio, usually about half of people have. Additionally, residents who choose not to participate can opt out at any time. There's no penalties. Conversely, folks can actually opt in at any time, and there's no cost to do so. Going back to the inception of the program, you guys had this as a ballot referendum in November of 2016, with the actual program taking effect in May of 2017. And if I just sum the savings, or sum the implied savings between the rate that we were able to secure and the rate you would have otherwise paid under Vectren times the load profile, I come out to about $130,000 of savings over that time. So May of 2017 to March of, it's about 5 years. Translates into about $170 per household, I believe. So savings have been there. On the electric side, just as an FYI, it's about $30,000. We expect that number to grow. Electric prices on a wholesale basis are up considerably year over year, but the way that AES now procures their energy, it's like a 1-year lag. So there will be a new rate in place in June, and we expect that savings will be very significant at that point. But getting back to the natural gas side of things, I can go into reasons if people are interested of why this bankruptcy occurred. It's kind of a long and technical story, but again, only if folks are interested in that. So ultimately, I'll point out a couple of things. We're pretty upset that this has happened. We vetted Volunteer when we first started doing business with them in about 2014. There was a winter storm event in February of 2021 that everybody may remember. It was called Winter Storm Uri, at least in Texas, and had massive implications for the gas markets nationwide. This was about a month before your guys' current contract with Volunteer was put in place, and we queried them about the impact of that storm, which impacted everybody, but the basic premise of the question was, are you guys, financially viable? And the answer was yes, it's no problem at all. We have this line of credit. I suspect that was not actually what wound up being true a year and a half later, or a year later. I think the storm had a lot to do with their problems. So at the end of the day, substantial savings have been realized. Everybody will be defaulting back to utility supply in the short term. I would note that for your guys' village in particular, I looked at the load profile, and about 80% of gas usage occurs from the months of October through March. So while residents will be subject to a higher rate now being on the standard choice offer through CenterPoint, generally speaking, not a whole lot of gas usage is actually occurring in the months, the spring, summer, and early fall months. So all things considered, the bills probably will not be very, very impactful relative to what they would have been anyways. From a medium to longer term perspective, we are actively engaged in discussions with other gas suppliers about being able to pick up the governmental aggregation program. We have to tread pretty carefully because we don't want to preempt anything that the bankruptcy court is ordering. It really shouldn't be an issue, but it's just something we have to be cognizant of. We would anticipate that if rates look favorable and you guys are in agreement as a council, that a rate could be put into effect this summer such that by the time heating season arrives next fall, next winter, you're back into fixed rate, price protected program with savings relative to the Vectren / CenterPoint SCO rate. So we believe this will be a short-term blip. I say we're very aggravated. I am very aggravated this has happened. I offer our apologies to you guys that this is going on. I would say you're not alone. There are apparently 200,000 customers impacted across Michigan and Ohio of volunteers, and that includes 139 local governmental aggregation programs like you guys have. So it's definitely not just your guys' issue. It's widespread. We have 9 other communities we work with in the same capacity we work with you guys, similarly impacted. I can get into more details about like recourse options that you guys would have, but the long story short, and I can confer with your law director, I'm not a lawyer, but from my reading of the contract, it's pretty clear that a bankruptcy event essentially nullifies the contract, and there really isn't any recourse in terms of, you know, the residents were going to pay one rate, now they're subject to a new rate. Can you claim damages for the delta? The short answer is no. That's in any kind of governmental aggregation contract, that's going to be written in that you can't seek those kind of consequential damages. I don't, correct me if I got the wrong term, something like that.
Sounds right to me.
Okay. So with that, are there questions that I can take from council or staff or any residents?
Yeah, so I have a few. So first, is there going to be any service interruptions?
No. Oh, great point. I'm sorry. Yeah. So the whole concept of the SCO, the standard choice offer put forth by Vectren/Centerpoint, is that to be that supplier of last resort. So no one's gas service is going to get turned off. There literally won't even be a change in, I mean, you guys, the residents all get their bills from Centerpoint anyways. There's just a line item that would have read volunteer energy at a rate. So none of that will change. There is always lots of little mailers from Centerpoint saying, you know, you're being dropped, and then there will likely be an influx of like door-to-door marketing, telemarketing, those kind of things. This is all very public news, so the competitive suppliers know that they can call or otherwise market to residents and say, hey, you know, we know you got kicked back onto default service, so here's this rate. We would encourage residents and business owners to be very, very cautious with those sorts of things. What you find frequently is like 2-month introductory rates that are fantastic, and then they jack up. And if you figure you got 2 months at a great rate in April and May when you're not using any gas, and then you happen to be under contract come November and December, and the rate's now, you know, wherever it is, there's just a lot of bad stuff that can happen, which is why most local governments are very much in favor of the aggregation concept, because just as a function of how it works, you really can't have any of those teaser rates or whatever you want to call it. It's generally a fixed rate, and there's not a lot of monkey business that can occur. So we would encourage residents, if you're interested in getting back on a program that would come to fruition sometime this summer likely, just sit tight. As I said, chances are your actual gas consumption will be so minimal that even if the rate is higher, it's going to be you know, a couple cents per month difference. So sit tight. If you don't want to, that's fine. Just be very cautious. There's a PUCO apples to apples site that tries to sort of give consumers an understanding of, is this a real rate? Is it subject to all kinds of changes and things of that nature? Sorry, your question was about service interruption, and I went on, but...
thank you for the explanation. Can you speak to your process now of, are you changing how you vet these companies moving forward, and how can we be assured that this is not going to happen again?
Yeah, so the volunteer energy, out of all the suppliers we work with, I guess the way I'd say our philosophy works, there are sort of 3 tiers of suppliers. And I don't mean to imply that one is better or worse than others. Just I'll call tier 1 would be like your large national suppliers, publicly owned companies, very accessible financial data, and just extremely unlikely that they're going to go bankrupt. Now, it does happen, but just that's that tier. Tier 2 would be what I would actually call a volunteer type company, where they are privately held, tend to be sort of like regional players as opposed to national players. Bankruptcy events are rare for things like that, and while we can request, you know, financial data and say, hey, what are your guys' financial arrangements to ensure that you can actually purchase and serve gas supply, we kind of have to take those folks at their word. There's not like an SEC filing that we can go look at and actually inspect the balance sheet, those kind of things. And I would say, if it may not be the right phrase, but if there was a trap we fell into, that was the trap. We took volunteer more or less at their word. They had served a number of our communities prior to the current contract and have never had any issue with them in terms of quality, kind of customer service aspect. But I think what this gets to is we have to weigh, we might have a volunteer type offer on this hand, and the rate may be slightly lower than that larger national player. But in times when you've got 8.5% CPI print for the inflation reading today, and just uncertain sort of times with financial black swan events, perhaps it makes more sense to actually enact the rate that, while maybe not quite as low, there's more confidence that that rate will persist for the full contract term, as opposed to this one, which basically covered 1 of 2 years. So I can't say that that's an ongoing discussion that we're having internally, is how do we do that. And ultimately, generally speaking, we make our recommendation to the various village and city councils. It's your guys' programs. We make recommendations. If you choose to act on them, that's great, but it's your call. I just think, if I had to guess, we would be raising this issue in that way that I just described, that, there is this low rate, but perhaps we need to look at the second lowest rate from a larger provider that we have more confidence, may not be the right word, but more of an insight into their financial stability than we could with a private entity. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
When we purchase gas or electric through an aggregate program like this, and then the energy delivery system, whether it be, I guess, CenterPoint Energy for the gas, when they run certain programs and things like that, since we're not purchasing the actual gas from them, but there are delivery, are we eligible for like the rebates and different programs that they run as a company?
Yeah. So the way I like to describe it, they're still the local utility, right? So they're making their profit. It's a regulated profit, but the PUCO approves a certain rate of return, yada yada yada. They're going to make that profit on delivering that gas or electric, in the case of electric, to the various account holders. They actually do not turn a profit from the procurement and supply of any energy. That's done through an auction process, and ultimately, if there is ever like they happen to come out ahead, they have to return that money to the ratepayers. So by participation in something like a GovAg program, no, you're not foregoing any sort of rebates or anything like that. There can be there's specific language that I couldn't recite, but essentially there can't be any discrimination of anyone.
I just know sometimes DP&L used to throw rebates on light bulbs.
Right.
And,
no, any of that stuff, you should still be,
when you update it and things like that.
Get your smart thermostat for free every once in a while.
Yes.
All those things you should still have access to. Occasionally, I can't say I've seen this happen on the gas side. Occasionally on the electric side, the actual suppliers of an aggregation program will offer their own incentives.
That was my next question.
Okay. We've never put a lot, I don't want to say it's gimmicky, because sometimes there's something there, but we have always looked at what's the best rate. And, if they want to give you a free Nest thermostat, that's great, but you don't want to have to pay extra to get that free. You're not really getting it free then, right? So, but that does exist out there, and many suppliers will actually argue that's probably the future, that they're all going to be engaged in things like that. So be on the lookout.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion with council?
If you don't mind, can I ask, you guys as residents, has everyone received some kind of a drop notice from CenterPoint indicating that you're going back at this point? Okay. We don't have a great window into that, and obviously everybody we would ask at Volunteer Energy is basically no longer there. I suspected that the way meter read cycles work, usually by like the 22nd-ish of each month, you've completed that month's meter read cycles. I would think within the next week, basically everybody's back on SEO service, and all the mailers and the headaches that creates should more or less be done with, I would think.
I do have a question. So by midsummer, or are you thinking midsummer? You might have something.
There's a lag built in terms of acquiring data, and then we have to give residents a certain amount of opt-out, like 21 days for the right to opt out of the program before you start enrolling folks. So even if we wanted to move like today, it would probably take 2 months to transition to everybody. We have to wait until I don't want to say we have to wait till the bankruptcy is final, but we need to get a little bit further along. Volunteer is, again, it doesn't apply to aggregation customers as far as we understand, but they're actually going after some of the consultants working with their commercial customer base who are trying to switch people who are still under contract with Volunteer, that Volunteer or their creditors, I guess, are trying to sell to another entity. And so we're not a party to any of that, but out of abundance of caution so that we don't get slapped with some kind of a court order, and the same thing for the various suppliers we would take this to. They basically won't be willing to transact for probably the next month would be my guess. We don't have like a definitive date that, you know, by May 1st everything's good.
Yeah.
We just need to see it advance a little bit further. So I think if we start, you know, actually engaging by May, like, you know, a month-ish from now, we would be in a position where, assuming the rates, it was the right time to actually procure, you could see a program sort of coming back online by July. That's just my guess, so don't hold me to it. It could be that, you know, for various market reasons, we say, hey, let's wait a month. Historically, once you get out of April and into May and June, that's when gas prices seasonally tend to kind of go like this because the winter's over and there's just not as much demand. That's a little bit messed up now, given all this Ukraine-Russia stuff and the implications for gas markets. I could spend an hour going into that. I won't. Long story short is we think there will be a drop in prices, and we think it will coincide with the lag period that I'm describing, such that we can get something going by summer.
Okay.
Again, subject to your guys' approval, so there will be more to come on that, I'm sure.
Thanks.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you guys. And you got our contact information if you need to relay any other questions. So thank you again, everybody. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to correspondence to council.
We have received none.
Thank you. Opening the floor to comments from citizens regarding tonight's legislation. Seeing none. Moving on to ordinances and resolutions. First is CM-22-13. And I'll turn that over to the law director.
Thank you. A resolution to award a contract for the upgrade of ADA sidewalk ramps within the 2022 municipal paving project areas. Whereas it is necessary to maintain the ADA sidewalk ramps for the safety of pedestrian travel within the municipality. And whereas this project has been properly bid according to Chapter 33 of the Code of Ordinances. And whereas the project will be funded out of the 2022 operating budget street levy fund. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the Municipality of West Milton, Ohio, that the council awards a contract to Coke Construction of West Milton, Ohio in the amount of $30,000. The municipal manager is hereby authorized to execute all the proper documents and contracts required to complete said program. This resolution shall take effect and be enforced from and after its passage.
Thank you. Before we move on with the legislation, I meant to inform everybody, the copies that are in your folder are going to be what is going to be read. There's a few changes from what was in the packet, so in case anybody hadn't seen that already, please, you'll see the changes there. So if you're following along with what was in the packet, that's it.
There are some very minor changes, and I'd be happy to explain if you'd like.
Opening up for discussion for CM-22-13.
So where are we putting these ramps?
Mr. Herron was not up to attending this evening. I cannot tell you the specific locations. I know that it's part of the paving program, so I would assume it's on the streets that are going to get paved. I believe there are a total of 5.
Okay.
I'll be happy to provide the specific locations at a future meeting.
Any other discussion? Any motions?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we accept resolution CM-22-13.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Dorman?
Yes.
Ms. Kopp?
Yes.
Mr. Hurst?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Ms. Metz? Yes. Mr. Tracy?
Yes.
Mayor Miller?
Yes. Next is CM-22-14.
A resolution to award a contract for the 2022 Municipality of West Milton Annual Paving Program. Whereas it is necessary to maintain our streets and service areas within the municipality. And whereas this project has been properly bid according to Chapter 33 of the Code of Ordinances, and whereas the project will be funded out of the 2022 operating budget street levy fund, now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the Municipality of West Milton, Ohio, that the council awards a contract to Wagner Paving Incorporated of Laura, Ohio, in the amount of $194,670 for street resurfacing. The municipal manager is hereby authorized to execute all the proper documents and contracts required to complete said program. This resolution shall take effect and be enforced from and after its passage.
Thank you. Manager Sherry.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is simply remind the council that we did have the opportunity to partner with the township on a portion of our project. Actually, I think it garnered a cost savings for both of us. It's my understanding that's not been done frequently in the past. I won't say it's the first time it ever happened, but I think it makes a lot of sense for us to work with the township whenever we have the opportunity.
Any discussion? Any motions?
Make a motion, we accept CM-22-14 as read.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorman?
Yes.
Ms. Cop?
Yes.
Mr. Hurst?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Ms. Metz?
Yes.
Mr. Tracy?
Yes.
Mayor Miller?
Yes. Next is CM-22-15.
A resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement for comprehensive planning services. Whereas the village last completed any comprehensive planning efforts in 2006, and whereas the mayor and council desires to plan for the future of the village, and whereas the village solicited multiple proposals for assistance with comprehensive planning, and whereas the village has determined that the proposal from Colabo Planning offers the best approach for the community, now therefore be it resolved by the council of the municipality of West Milton, Ohio. The council of West Milton hereby authorizes the execution of an agreement for comprehensive planning services and payments not to exceed $52,000. This resolution shall take effect and be in full force from and after its passage.
Mr. Sheridan.
As you may recall, the number one priority that you established for 2021 was a comprehensive plan. My initial approach to accomplish that goal was to bring on additional staffing. When we failed to secure a planner for the municipality, we had to come up with Plan B. So this is Part A of Plan B, in that I believe this firm will offer the best opportunity for beginning our comprehensive planning process. And so once this contract is signed, I would expect that the consultants will make arrangements to be in the village shortly and start meeting with us and starting the planning process. But I very much look forward to working with them on this.
Any discussion with the council?
So are we still looking to hire a planner at some point?
Probably not this year,
Okay,
because the money to pay the consultant is what I had budgeted for his salary.
okay.
So a year from now, depending on what the circumstances are, or maybe I should say the end of this year, depending on where we're at and what the economy looks like, I do believe the village ultimately does need staffing if we're going to continue to grow, but we also have to be able to afford it. So we're going to pay the consultant this year, and I'm going to take the responsibility of managing the process.
Okay.
Are there any motions for the resolution?
Mr. Mayor, I will make a motion to accept Resolution CM-22-15 as written.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorman?
Yes.
Ms. Cop?
Yes.
Mr. Hurst?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Ms. Metz?
Yes.
Mr. Tracy?
Yes.
Mayor Miller?
Yes. Next is CM-22-16.
A resolution authorizing the payment of premium to the village's new property and casualty carrier. Whereas the village regularly reviews village contracts and agreements with vendors to ensure competitive pricing, and whereas the village solicited proposals from property and casualty carriers, and whereas the village was able to secure better coverage at a lower premium, and whereas the village has determined it is in the best interest of the village to engage in new property and casualty carrier. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the Municipality of West Milton, Ohio. The Council of West Milton hereby authorizes the payment of $47,908 for property and casualty insurance. This resolution shall take effect and be in full force from and after its passage.
Mr. Sherry.
We began a review of the property and casualty insurance earlier this year. As you may recall, we had to authorize a payment in, I believe it was August of last year, even though the policy due date was in April. We hadn't made a payment because they hadn't invoiced us. They did indicate that the premium was going to go up. Our previous carrier's premium for 1 year was $67,000. We were able to secure another municipal pool, a much larger pool. I believe our first pool was approximately 50 members. This pool has 576 members. And we actually have significantly better coverage, higher payouts, and more areas are covered at a significantly lower premium.
Any discussion with council? Any motions?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept CM-22-16.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorman?
Yes.
Ms. Cott?
Yes.
Mr. Hurst?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Ms. Metz?
Yes.
Mr. Tracy?
Yes.
Mayor Miller?
Yes. Last is CM-22-17.
A resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement for zoning and land development code updating services. Whereas the village is experiencing growth and new construction, and whereas the village has determined that much of the village code that pertains to zoning, land usage, and development needs reviewed and updated, and whereas the mayor and council desires to ensure that the codes that pertain to zoning, land usage, and development are appropriate for today and the future, and whereas the village has determined that the proposal from Choice 1 offers the best approach for updating those areas of the village code. Now therefore be it resolved by the council of the municipality of West Milton, Ohio. The council of West Milton hereby authorizes the execution of an agreement for updating zoning, land development, and subdivision codes, including zoning maps and payments, not to exceed $20,000. This resolution shall take effect and be in full force from and after its passage.
So this addresses the second primary responsibility a new planner would have had to update the land use codes. So I, again, looked at different options, and Choice 1, who we already have a relationship with, has that expertise on staff. This gives us the ability at significantly less than 20 to do most of the work, but also have a planner on call if I do need some expertise locally. So I don't expect to spend $20,000. The new maps, the new code, and so forth are less than that, but there's some additional per hour charge if I need a planner locally. So that's why it's at $20,000. But we've had a great relationship with Choice 1. They, in effect, are going to come in with a turnkey setup, all new forms, a new ordinance. We'll work with the planning board, go through it chapter by chapter. But I think within 6 months, we'll have a significantly better setup for new growth.
So are you anticipating in 6 months that we would be looking at all new zoning code? Or
I haven't decided whether the planning board's going to take it a chapter at a time, whether we send it to you a chapter at a time or we do the whole new code. I'd like to discuss that with Lene and get a better handle on that. So that's yet to be determined.
Okay.
Other questions?
Do you think there's an option that the zoning codes are available online so residents can?
They are going to be very soon. We actually now have a PDF. The issue now is with our website. We're still working on trying to correct. I think we actually have more control of it, but to take it to the level where we can easily do that, we're probably going to have to pay some money to get a different type of website. So I do have a PDF, so now we can actually search, like everybody else has been able to do for 20 years, and I just don't have it available on the website yet.
Yes, that would be very beneficial. I think we talked about that a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Just
It's-
never.
Well,
Oh, by
the
the
website's always been a,
Now, when I looked at your scores for the goals and priorities of 2022, website didn't go that high. But we're going to try to get it done this year. I just got to find the money and find the time to get it done.
I think my footnote on that was just needs to happen.
Yes.
I was going to say, is that one of the 6 or 7 you had ranked number one?
Yep, had too many number ones.
Yeah. Come on. So,
But like you said, like everyone else has for 20 years.
It needs to be done. We need a far better vehicle to communicate with our citizens.
Absolutely.
Any other discussion or questions about the resolution?
So the process would be in conjunction with planning board, the choice one would
Well,
advise them directly or hand them a,
What I expect to happen
revision.
is we'll go through a chapter at a time where they'll see our current and what we propose, the differences in language. And in most cases, it's not updating what we had, it's just starting over again with a different approach.
Okay.
So they'll have a chance to review it, see what we like, what we don't like, what changes need to be made. I would expect that not everything they've proposed will necessarily fit us, but I do, from my review, most of it will. I won't say that I have all of the details of the process worked out, but obviously, planning board's going to have its hands full if we're dealing with a comp plan. At the same time, we're trying to update the code. The problem is we need them both sooner rather than later. So we may have to, for example, ask the planning board to create a subcommittee who's willing to deal just with the ordinance, for example, and involve some additional citizenry who have an interest in that area. But we've got to find a way to move it forward.
Thank you.
I don't know if you have any questions for Mr. Schuman. He was instrumental in helping me put this together, and I greatly appreciate his help.
We look forward to working with you.
yeah, guys do.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, discussion? Any motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to accept CM-22-17.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorman?
Yes.
Ms. Cop?
Yes.
Mr. Hurst?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Ms. Metz?
Yes.
Mr. Tracy?
Yes.
Mayor Miller?
Yes. Moving on to manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just update or a couple of items. You have my weekly report, and as I explained, the security upgrades here at Village Hall will soon be complete. I would expect certainly sometime this week. The chief of police and his staff, as well as Mr. Herron, have been very helpful in putting this together. I do think it's going to be a significant improvement going forward, but it was a pretty noisy 2 weeks while they were trying to get it installed, so I think all of staff is glad that it's done. The other piece, the Recreation, Health, and Wellness Survey that was completed on March 11th. I want to thank everyone who participated in the survey or encouraged others to participate in the survey. The school corporation was very helpful in getting the word out, and certainly want to appreciate all their efforts. I will remind you that initially it was communicated to us from the Y that we needed 250 responses for the survey to be statistically relevant. At the end of March 11th, we had 508 responses. As I understand it, that means the margin of error will be less than 10%. I have received some of the preliminary data because initially, let me remind you that the village agreed to pay half the cost, but at the end, the Y agreed to pay 100% of the cost. And as such, their executive committee will receive the final report probably later this month. And then I would expect we'll be presenting it to you at one of the meetings in May. But there's some very valuable data. One, for example, that I think is very strong in our favor is I believe 70% of the respondents don't currently belong to the Y. So in terms of a market for the Y to expand to, I think West Milton makes perfect sense. So the next challenge will be, assuming that the Y will continue to work with us, finding the funds to build the facility, and then making sure that it can be operated and fiscally operated in a common sense way. Any questions on either of those issues?
Will we get a full report after you get it back?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm interested to see
Absolutely.
what everybody says.
Yeah, well, it was anonymous, you won't know who, but
Right.
yeah, no, you'll get the full report. There were a couple of items that jumped out at me. I was surprised that 60% of the respondents were not West Milton graduates, that 60% who responded. Now, this is not just the village, this is the entire township. My perception was that would be higher, that more were. The other was the level of educational attainment. Something like 45% had either an associate's, a bachelor's, a master's, or a doctorate. That's any perception of it being a blue-collar community. I'm not sure that's exactly accurate. That's a high percentage of educational attainment. And those are all strong positive indicators, in my opinion, of the village. So I'm very excited about the information. Our park ranked very high. We had a huge number of folks who said they visit the park every day. That's one thing to visit it every day in the summer, but year-round? So, I mean, but I was down in the park today with some staff, and there were dozens of people. Now, it's a beautiful day, but still. So the park is great. Now, we really need more parkland for a village our size, but that's a challenge for another day. So, any other questions? That's all I have.
Moving on to old business, we have appointments to the village planning board.
As the mayor, I'm sorry, as you may recall, we did get 2 candidates who applied. And the candidate for the planning board is a gentleman by the name of Tyler Kiger. I don't know if you want to take these one at a time, or you want me to give you both candidates for both positions.
Go ahead and go with both.
Mr. Kiger was the candidate for the planning board, and Mr. Pavicic was the candidate for the Board of Adjustments. You should have their letters of interest in your packets, the one in your folder today, not necessarily in the packet that you got on Friday. Should be near the back. Should be at the very back, Laura.
Any discussion or comments about the 2 applicants? Is there a motion for, and let me make sure I have this, nomination for Mr. Kiger?
I'd like to nominate Tyler Kiger for the planning board position.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And is there a nomination for Mr., I'm going to butcher,
Pavicic.
Pavicic?
Ooh,
Pavicic.
you're good.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to nominate Nick Pavicic to the Board of Adjustments position.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much. We now have full boards of planning and of adjustments.
That makes Jeff happy.
Now you just make them stay. Nobody can resign. Looking at you. Nobody can move.
I believe there's some other old business.
Oh,
Scott?
yes, I'm gonna say it's old business because it's something that was brought to my attention in the fall, and I just kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts on it. So I had a resident, I've had a couple of residents bring to my attention some issues with brush, excessive piles of brush, just sticks and, things that are just in the yard waste kind of thing. So as I am going around town, and this particular citizen had brought it to my attention in the fall about this brush pile and, saying they're going to use it to burn in their,
Kindling.
yeah, you know, right? Everybody has that. Well, how long is too long to keep a brush pile? It's still there, that kind of thing. So, and I've had a couple of other people say some things to me. And so as I'm going around town, and I remember one yard in particular also, you know, they cut a tree down and the brush pile stayed for almost a year. You know, is that something that we need to look into? You hate to do that kind of stuff, but should there be a period that you're like, okay, I don't think you're gonna be using that in your campfire, let's get rid of it kind of thing. So I just wanted to get your guys' feedback and ideas on what you think is too long to have a pile of brush in your yard.
If I may, your code currently prohibits it. That's
It
specific.
prohibits any brush.
Correct. You can be cited under the code enforcement for brush and litter. It's all in the same ordinance. So there is some discretion, obviously, but technically it's not permitted.
Okay.
So-
I don't know if I
So
realized that.
let's say that Sarah notices that someone has a pile of brush and she complains. What's
Yes.
that procedure usually look like?
Regardless of who complains, if that is brought to my attention, I will do one of two things. I'll either drive out and attempt to make contact with the property owner to educate them on the issue, and/or a letter will go out doing the same thing. And then we try to follow up in a few weeks. One of two things, they'll either agree to get rid of it, resolve the issue, or they may suggest, as the counselor has, that it's there for a reason. It's not trash. It's not, they didn't leave it there by mistake. They purposely are trying to keep it. I've not had someone take that position, but also haven't strongly enforced just brush. So I can't say that that's been resolved. The three areas that we emphasized last fall when we started the code enforcement sweep was trash, but not necessarily brush, the junk cars, and what was the third? Tall grass and weeds. And just those, and that doesn't mean we didn't enforce other stuff, but that's where our emphasis was. And we had 100 cases, and we resolved about 80% of them. So we can add brush as an emphasis, but especially in light of your description, if you've got some residents who it's not an oversight, they're specifically wanting to store them, you can either alter the ordinance or you can enforce it. That's entirely up
And
to
I
you.
think this particular person is probably saying that we're storing it, we'll use it in time, but then it just remains. So
When your brush pile becomes your compost pile?
and it's looking nasty to your neighbors. You know, that's the other thing. You're living beside all these people, and you want to be respectful of your neighbors, you know. You got to live together. So
Sure.
it just becomes this battle of, well, it looks like crap on your property kind of thing, clean it up.
Yeah.
So it's just tricky, and you don't want to have to tell people what to do, but again, you want to keep your property looking nice. So,
We
I think it's
can
probably-
certainly enforce, we can certainly enforce it as written.
okay.
It helps to know that that's your intent. Much of code enforcement is discretion and interpreting. Where's the line between an acceptable pile of stuff and trash?
Right.
What's our current policy on pickup with waste and refuse, with stuff like that?
The yard
Down
waste,
limbs and
right,
stuff like that.
Yard waste, what we're suggesting is they go ahead and put it in their normal trash. If they can fit it in the can, they should. We'll just pick it up. If they can't or they won't, we do run a special pickup just for yard waste, but it's going to all end up in the same place. So it's just as easy. It actually saves the village money if you'll go ahead and put it in your toter.
Okay, but what's the ability of this city to pick it up if it won't fit in the toter?
It takes man hours. We send people out with a pickup truck and we ask them to bag it or have it tied up. We do put a limit on how long, like we won't take a log 12 feet.
Right,
But you
right.
cut it down to 4 or 5. But it's much more labor intensive, and it's not like it gets composted somewhere. For the most part, it gets hauled away. Yeah.
If somebody's in that situation, do they need to just call the village office?
Where they need a pickup?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just
We schedule
schedule
it like we do the bulk pickup. But we're trying very hard to educate them. If you want to keep your rates low and you can fit it in your toter, do that. Even if you have to wait a couple weeks. Well, my bags are full. Okay, do it next week. Or get a second toter. They're so inexpensive. That makes so much more sense if we can pick it up with the machine and not have to send 2 or 3 guys out there with a pickup truck. That's how we'll keep the rates as low as they are. Any other questions?
Okay. No.
Do you want it more strictly enforced? What's the council's pleasure?
I don't know.
I know we have 2 piles in our yard, I'll just confess.
There's a one.
We have one pile that's at the back of our yard that when we're mowing and we have a giant oak that has shedding and stuff like that, and it just gets piled and the neighbors pile, and we do draw on that when we do have bonfires, but specifically the difference between that being a stick pile and what we burn in our fire pit is the stuff in our fire pit we break down and dry and stack near our logs, and it's an organized, it's all the sticks are broken to pieces that'll obviously fit in the fire pit. The other illegal mess apparently is just whatever fell from the tree and out of the way of the mower till we can mow, and then we eventually get to it. I think we empty it out about once every other year or something like that, us and the neighbors, but yeah.
I think that's what I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts, because
I would say
some people
there's
care, some don't. It's a hard thing.
there's a big difference between collecting sticks that have fallen out of a tree in your yard and then cutting a tree down and leaving it sit there.
Yeah.
I think that
It should be pretty obvious.
Can I offer a suggestion? I would suggest that on a parcel where everything else is in order, the grass is mowed, everything else is neat, there's not trash laying anywhere, if there's a small brush pile, that probably would be okay. If there's other problems and the brush pile is only one of them, that would be the difference where I'm going to enforce that as opposed to a neighbor with a reasonably small pile. Probably would not cite that person. So my guess is if you've got a big pile of sticks, you may not mow often enough, you may not pick up other things. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I would probably draw the line in terms of enforcement, if you're comfortable with that.
Makes sense. I don't know that we need a special crackdown on brush
Whatever.
piles, but but that approach makes sense. Or if you run into
It can be
just something
case by
egregious,
case,
obviously it's going to
Sure.
be,
If a resident called with that complaint, and I went out and looked, and what I found was a neat yard other than that, my question back would say, have you let them know that it's an issue for you? Go talk to your neighbor. No, I haven't done that. Okay. Well, I'll go talk to him. I won't tell who. That's probably the first question I get when I'm doing code enforcement. Well, who called you? Or who told you? Doesn't matter. That's not relevant. But a complaint was filed, and it's my job to follow up. I just knocked on their door. Is there any chance, what's it for? Is it an oversight, or are you purposely storing it? Would you mind reducing it, or cutting it in half, or getting rid of it? And
Stack it somewhere
most times, stack it somewhere else. Don't make it so visible. Most times, neighbors will cooperate if they know there's an issue. Not always, but most times.
I would say the risk you run into also when people don't pay attention and take care of it is that it becomes a risk for animal habitat, for skunks, raccoons, possums.
Sure.
Everything else like that.
Big enough pile, yeah.
If you've got weeds growing up taller than the pile, and that becomes an issue. If you're keeping it to use or organizing it to get rid of, it doesn't do that.
No, I agree.
Yep.
I agree.
I feel like a letter, personally, people, you kind of lose sight of what's in your yard and what has been there. You have blinders on to that, where other people may not. But if maybe a letter people received not that you need to knock on the door and, you know, but like a blanket statement, people are like,
Sure.
oh, right, we have had that a while, maybe we should. Or is there an option, like we have leaf pickup, that maybe we have a spring, like, log and, you know, lots of branches fall over the winter when you go to mow your yard first?
I think the demand is certainly seasonal, so they send out more when we're doing that. I don't know that we schedule a village-wide brush pickup, but that's not to say we couldn't. If there was enough demand, I think certainly the street department would make that happen.
Prior to even us doing our own garbage, when we've had significant storm,
Mhm.
the city's been
Sure,
amazing
the
about
guys- yeah.
Ben and them go out, rent a truck and a grinder and
Yeah,
and
oh,
come
yeah.
around, and the word goes out, bring it to the curb, have it this way,
Right,
and,
yep.
you know, so I think as a community, we are responsive to that when those
I agree.
unforeseen things happen.
Yep. We just don't do it on a regular basis.
Just to what you were saying, we had a couple limbs come down off a big pine tree, and they sat there all winter because they had shoulder surgery.
Yeah.
And we've slowly been putting them into our regular trash and out because I won't burn that stuff
Sure.
in our backyard, so, or our fireplace, so.
On
The
the-
overtime method does work too.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on a similar topic, if I may, I would certainly encourage all our residents, if you can shut the lid on your trash can, do so. We don't require all the trash to be bagged, but if it is, that reduces the likelihood it's going to blow away when we try to empty it. And so we don't require it, but it sure would make things easier. And again, the less time the driver has to get out and go chase trash, the faster it is and the more efficient it is. So maybe in the interest of keeping our rates low, try to bag everything if you can. And understand, if you've got more stuff in there than the lid will close, you might need a second toter.
Jeff, I would just ask, or add to what you asked earlier about what do we want to enforce. I would like to enforce whatever codes we have, and if there are codes we feel like we shouldn't enforce, then we shouldn't have those codes.
I don't disagree and would hope that that'll be addressed as we update those codes.
Yeah.
Because we clearly don't enforce all that we have.
Yeah,
For
because there's
various
probably
reasons.
stuff from 1846, we look at it and say, no, nobody cares about that anymore.
If I'm
Let's
not,
get rid
if
of
I'm
it."
not mistaken, we have a fairly significant section on filling in your privy.
Yeah.
I've not enforced that.
Any other old business with council? Any new business? No. Any comments by citizens this evening?
Good evening.
Mr. Craig.
Hi. The paving that you guys mentioned in tonight's meeting, I didn't catch where that was going to be, what streets or areas that was going to cover. More parking lots or
It's the
actual
same-
streets?
It's the same ones that Ben's discussed every time as far as the 2022. I don't actually have the plan in front of me.
I know we've had some
It'll be
paving
streets.
done last year.
Correct, it'll be the streets. I don't have the list in front of me, but
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't mentioned, so I was wondering if,
It's been mentioned multiple times as we were putting the plan
it
together.
wasn't mentioned tonight.
That's
And
correct.
things change, so I don't
It has not
assume.
changed. It has not changed from what was previously presented.
no other streets have been added or deleted from the list.
Okay, so it's up to the citizens to review other past meetings to
We'll,
get up to
we'll,
speed
we'll,
on that.
we'll bring it to the next council meeting, so we'll read them again.
Is Chris looking for it?
I'm looking.
Are you? All right.
I know Ben gave us a presentation on it,
He did.
and I thought I had it right here, but
All right, Chris, you're the
doesn't seem like
man.
I've got it.
I'm looking, I've got it. It's just finding it.
It may have already made it into my archive pile at home. Yeah, must be in the archive.
Something good, put on the website someplace.
Agreed. It absolutely should be on the website and the Facebook page.
He said that tongue in cheek.
Well, no, I think you meant it serious.
Really?
Oh, yes.
2022
Well, there's
annual paving
previous
program.
discussion about the
20
website.
2022 annual paving program. Frederick Garland Road, west of South Miami, westbound lane to corporate limit. Frederick Garland Road, west of South Miami, eastbound lane to corporate limit. DeBron Road, all. Pinewood Drive, all. Willow Way, 300 feet. Locust Lane, 975 feet. Beetle Alley, 360 feet.
Awesome.
That help?
Yeah, I think so.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a question. You talk about your streets. Did you notice that somebody busted a curb out and put a water line out from their house to run it out on the street on J Road?
I don't know if Ben is dealing with that or not. It does happen occasionally.
Because me and you both went by at the same time when the guy done it, and that's why I wondered if anybody had said anything.
I'll have to double check with Ben to make sure I let him know about it.
Because they concreted back over the pipe sticking out onto the street on J Road there.
Okay.
But they ain't fixed the sidewalk back yet. But they did, they trenched it all the way from their basement all the way out and putting it in the street.
If my memory is correct, I've talked to Ben about that one, but I'll make sure tomorrow.
Right across from the basketball court.
Yep, volleyball court, yeah.
Any other comments by citizens? Seeing none. Is there a motion for adjournment?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, everybody, for visiting with us. See you on the next month.